The day America did not look back. They say America was built by dreamers. That is a lie. America was built by people who had no other choice. On a cold morning in April 1907, the Atlantic Ocean was unusually quiet. No storms, no waves worth remembering. The kind of deceptive calm that made men believe history had decided to rest for a moment. On the deck of the steamship SS Kaiser Wilhelm II, a 17-year-old boy stood barefoot, gripping the rusted iron railing with hands that had already learned what hunger felt like. His name was Samuel Adler. He did not know that within 50 years, his blood would help decide the shape of American power. He did not know that the country he was about to enter would give him everything and take even more in return. He did not know that America never looks back at the people who build it. All he knew was this: if he stepped onto that land, there would be no way back. Behind him were 1,000 immigrants, Italians, Jews, Irish, Poles, Germans, each carrying a suitcase filled mostly with fear. Ahead of them was a silhouette rising from the mist, the Statue of Liberty. Some people cried when they saw her. Some prayed, some fell to their knees. Samuel felt nothing, not hope, not joy, only the sharp, terrifying awareness that survival had now become a full-time job. Ellis Island was not a door, it was a test. When the ship docked, America did not welcome them, it measured them. Ellis Island smelled like disinfectant, sweat, and panic. Doctors in white coats inspected eyes with metal hooks. Officials asked questions in a language most immigrants barely understood. Name? Age? Do you work? Are you sick? Do you believe in anarchism? One wrong answer meant deportation. Samuel watched a man collapse after failing an eye exam. 2 guards dragged him away like broken cargo. His wife screamed until someone slapped her silent. America did not care. When it was Samuel's turn, an inspector looked at him for less than 10 seconds. Occupation? Samuel hesitated. He had worked in a textile mill in Hamburg since the age of 11, fingers scarred by machines older than morality. I work, he said. The inspector stamped his papers. That sound, the stamp hitting paper, was louder than any gunshot Samuel would hear later in life. It was the sound of permission. New York did not feel like freedom. New York felt like noise. Horse carriages, factory whistles, street vendors shouting in 10 languages, children working instead of playing. The city did not sleep, it hunted. Samuel found a room in a Lower East Side tenement shared by 6 men. The walls were thin enough to hear dreams dying in the next room. He worked 12 hours a day in a garment factory for $7 a week. He stitched uniforms for a country that did not consider him human. In 1907, America was exploding with industry: steel, railroads, oil, banking. Men like J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller were gods. Men like Samuel were fuel. No one talked about the cost. The first American lesson: you are replaceable. One night, a machine jammed. Samuel reached in too quickly. The needle pierced his palm, blood soaking into fabric meant for wealthy men who would never ask who made their clothes. The factory manager looked at him with irritation, not concern. If you can't work, leave. Samuel wrapped his hand in cloth and kept sewing. That night, he learned the first American lesson: pain is acceptable, slowing down is not. History was moving, whether he was ready or not. In 1908, the financial system nearly collapsed. In 1911, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory burned, killing 146 workers, mostly young immigrant women. Samuel watched smoke rise from blocks away. America mourned for a week, then it went back to work. But something changed inside him. He began reading newspapers after work, learned English word by word, understood that America was not just a country, it was a machine powered by ambition and indifference. And machines, if studied closely, could be controlled. When war came, America needed him. In 1917, America entered World War I. Suddenly, Samuel was no longer just an immigrant. He was useful. Factories expanded, wages rose slightly, patriotism became mandatory, speaking German in public became dangerous. Samuel changed his accent, changed his posture, changed his silence into strategy. When the draft notice arrived, he did not resist. Some men fight for flags, some fight for survival. On the battlefield in France, Samuel learned another truth. America's power came not from morality, but from scale. Endless supplies, endless men, endless confidence. He watched friends die for land they could not pronounce. He survived by understanding one thing. History rewards those who endure, not those who deserve. The war ended. The struggle did not. When Samuel returned to New York in 1919, America was richer, louder, and more divided than ever. The roaring 20s were beginning. Jazz filled the streets, stocks rose, alcohol was banned, but everywhere, wealth became a performance. And Samuel Adler, once a barefoot boy on a ship, now stood at the edge of something dangerous: opportunity. He had saved money, he understood systems, he had lost fear. And America loves men like that, until it doesn't.
When America learned to gamble. In the summer of 1921, America decided it was done being careful. The war was over, the dead were buried, Europe was broken, and New York was drunk on the belief that it had won not just a war, but the future. Samuel Adler stood on the corner of Broad Street and Wall Street, watching men in tailored suits rush past like time itself had been set on fast forward. Money moved here differently. It didn't walk, it ran. This was not the America of factories and sweat. This was the America of numbers, whispers, and bets. And Samuel wanted in. From factory floors to office shadows. He did not start on Wall Street. No one like Samuel ever did. He started as a messenger for a brokerage firm, carrying envelopes he was not allowed to open, delivering instructions that could ruin lives without ever touching them. He ran errands for men who smelled of cigars and certainty. But Samuel watched. He watched how men spoke about money as if it were alive, how they smiled when others lost, how success had less to do with intelligence and more to do with timing and ruthlessness. At night, he studied financial pages the way other men studied scripture. Stocks, bonds, margins, leverage. America was inventing a new religion, and it was called confidence. The second American lesson: appear successful before you are. In 1923, Samuel bought his first suit, used, slightly too large, but clean. That suit changed how people spoke to him. Doors opened, voices softened, assumptions shifted. In America, appearance was not deception, it was participation. He began offering tips to factory friends, pooling small investments, earning modest commissions. He learned to speak just confidently enough to be believed, but not so boldly as to be blamed. By 1925, he was no longer delivering messages, he was making suggestions. The Roaring Twenties were loud for a reason. Jazz clubs filled Harlem, women cut their hair and raised their voices, alcohol flowed despite prohibition, greased by corruption that everyone pretended not to see. America was partying on borrowed time. Stocks rose because people believed they would. People borrowed money to buy stocks because they believed belief itself was value. Samuel knew something was wrong. No machine could move this fast forever. But he also knew another American truth. When everyone is running toward a cliff, the man who stops is trampled. So he ran. Power has a language. By 1927, Samuel met Charles Whittemore, a senior partner at the firm, born into wealth so old it had never known hunger. Whittemore liked Samuel not because he trusted him, but because Samuel understood silence. Samuel did not ask questions, he listened. He learned how information moved before the public knew it existed, how insiders whispered and outsiders paid. Whittemore once told him over whiskey, "America isn't a country, it's a negotiation." Samuel never forgot that. Then the music stopped. October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. The stock market did not crash politely, it screamed. Men jumped from windows, fortunes evaporated before lunch, banks closed their doors like guilty consciences. Samuel stood on Wall Street as panic tore through the crowd. He watched men who once walked like gods now beg for mercy from numbers that no longer cared. He lost money, everyone did, but he survived because he had learned something deeper than strategy. He had learned restraint. The Great Depression did not arrive overnight. It crept. Factories closed, breadlines grew, families shattered under the weight of shame. America, the loudest optimist in the room, fell silent. Samuel walked through neighborhoods where hunger had become routine. He recognized the faces. They looked like the boy he once was. He could have helped more. He didn't. This was the third American lesson. Survival and guilt rarely coexist. Rebuilding on broken ground. By 1933, Franklin Roosevelt took office. The New Deal promised reform, regulation, and hope. Samuel saw opportunity. Regulation created loopholes. Government spending created contracts. Crisis created men willing to bend. He began advising small businesses navigating federal programs. He invested cautiously. He became useful again. By the end of the decade, he was no longer surviving, he was positioning. History was preparing another test. In Europe, Hitler rose. In Asia, Japan expanded. In America, isolation cracked. Samuel felt it before newspapers admitted it. Another war was coming, and America, once again, would need men like him. Men who understood systems, men who could move quietly, men who knew that morality was flexible when power was at stake. Samuel Adler had crossed an ocean to escape hunger. Now he stood inside the machinery of a nation preparing to reshape the world. And the machine was hungry again.
The price of loyalty. War does not begin with explosions. It begins with paperwork. In 1940, before Pearl Harbor, before speeches and flags and ration cards, Samuel Adler found himself sitting in a windowless government office in Washington, D.C., listening to men speak in careful half-sentences. They did not say war, they said preparedness. They did not say weapons, they said materials. America was arming itself quietly, the way a gambler hides cards before a final hand. And Samuel was about to become useful in a way that would permanently stain his conscience. The fourth American lesson: loyalty is conditional. Samuel's role was simple, on paper. He advised procurement offices on logistics, how to move steel, textiles, fuel, and machinery faster than anyone else. Unofficially, he helped companies position themselves to win government contracts. There was no gun in his hand. There was a pen, and the pen reshaped the war. Factories that had once sewn dresses now produced uniforms. Plants that built cars now assembled tanks.
Efficiency was worshipped. Speed excused everything. Samuel watched money flow like blood through arteries of policy. He told himself it was necessary. Everyone did. Pearl Harbor changed the tone, not the direction. December 7th, 1941. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, America did not hesitate. The nation unified overnight. Flags appeared in windows, young men enlisted. Fear and purpose merged into something powerful. Samuel felt something else: relief. War removed ambiguity. It justified excess. It forgave shortcuts. He worked longer hours, made sharper decisions. He stopped asking questions that had no profitable answers. The internment order. In 1942, Executive Order 9066 was signed. Japanese Americans were forced into internment camps. Samuel read the order twice. He did not protest. He did not assist. He remained silent, because silence, by now, felt like a skill. A family he did not know how to love. Samuel had married in 1936. His wife, Eleanor, believed in rules, in ethics, in the idea that America could be corrected if people tried hard enough. Their son, David, was 8 years old when the war began. David asked simple questions. Why are people angry? Why are some people not allowed to go home? Why do you work all the time? Samuel did not know how to answer questions that accused him without words. Victory was profitable. By 1944, it was clear the Allies would win. Samuel's investments soared. His contacts multiplied. He sat in rooms with men who would later write history. They spoke openly now about influence, about post-war markets, about rebuilding Europe, not out of compassion, but opportunity. Samuel realized something terrifying. War had not corrupted America. It had revealed it. The fifth American lesson: winners write ethics later. When the war ended in 1945, America emerged richer, stronger, and morally exhausted. Celebrations filled the streets, soldiers came home, factories boomed, and Samuel Adler stood at the peak of what he had chased for nearly 40 years: power, security, relevance. But he had lost something else: a son who saw too clearly. David was 17 when he confronted his father. "You help them," he said. "Who?" Samuel asked. "People who don't care." Samuel had no defense, because David was right. The boy who once crossed an ocean with nothing had become a man who knew the cost of everything and felt very little of it. History does not end, it transitions. America entered the Cold War quietly. New enemies, new fears, new industries. Samuel was asked to stay involved, to advise, to influence, to guide. He declined, not out of morality, out of exhaustion. For the first time, he wondered what legacy meant in a country that consumes its builders without ceremony. The question he could not escape. In 1950, Samuel stood in Central Park, watching his son walk ahead of him, confident, educated, untouched by the hunger that had shaped his own life. He asked himself the only question that mattered: was it worth it? America had given him everything he was promised, but it had taken more than he knew how to name. Samuel Adler would die quietly 5 years later. No headlines, no statues, no apologies. Just another man who helped build a nation that prefers its myths to its memories.
The Sons of Silence.
David Adler grew up in a house where words were used carefully, if at all. His father believed silence was discipline. His mother believed silence was survival. Between them, David learned to observe before he spoke and to distrust certainty. America in the 1950s looked confident on the surface. Suburbs expanded, television sets glowed in living rooms. The country sold itself a vision of perfection, trimmed lawns and smiling families wrapped in red, white, and blue. David saw the cracks. A different kind of war. The Cold War did not ask for uniforms right away. It asked for obedience. In school, David practiced duck-and-cover drills, crouching under desks as if wood and faith could stop nuclear fire. Teachers spoke of freedom with rehearsed seriousness. Fear hid behind formality. At home, Samuel said little. He had built a life on understanding systems. Now he watched a new system rise, one that traded external enemies for internal suspicion. McCarthy's America. In the early 1950s, accusations traveled faster than facts. Communist, sympathizer, traitor. Careers ended with whispers. Friendships dissolved under paranoia. Loyalty was measured by how loudly one denied doubt. David watched neighbors turn on neighbors. He asked his father once, "Is this what safety looks like?" Samuel did not answer. Silence had become inheritance. Choosing a different path. David did not go into finance. He studied history. Not the kind printed in textbooks, but the kind buried in letters, speeches, and forgotten testimonies. He wanted to understand how nations convinced themselves they were righteous while doing irreparable harm. His professors warned him. "Be careful," one said. "America doesn't like mirrors." David smiled and kept digging. The Civil Rights Awakening. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. By 1960, students sat at segregated counters. By 1963, voices filled the National Mall. David was there. He listened to Dr. King speak about dreams that contradicted lived reality. He watched police batons swing at peaceful protesters. He felt the dissonance of a nation preaching liberty while rationing it. This was not theoretical. This was history breathing. The sixth American lesson: progress is fought, not granted. Samuel watched the movement from a distance. He admired its courage, but feared its consequences. He had survived by avoiding attention. His son was walking directly into it. They argued for the first time in years. "You think silence keeps you safe," Samuel replied, "and you think noise changes things." Both were right. Vietnam and the breaking point. When Vietnam escalated, David was drafted. Samuel used every contact he had to try to stop it. For the first time, power failed him. David left for a war no one could explain clearly. Letters came back changed, shorter, heavier. Samuel felt something he had avoided his entire life: helplessness. A generation that would not be quiet. By 1968, America was burning. Cities, trust, illusions. David returned alive but altered. He marched, he questioned, he refused easy answers. Samuel watched his son become the kind of man America often punishes before it learns from. The passing of the builder. Samuel Adler died in 1955 before seeing the country fully fracture. But his legacy lived on in his son's defiance. David understood what Samuel never could articulate. Silence builds nations.
but voices reshape them. This story is not about one man. It is about how America passes its contradictions down like inheritance, each generation choosing what to accept and what to fight.
What a nation chooses to remember. By the 1970s, America no longer trusted its own reflection. Vietnam had ended not with victory, but with exhaustion. The Pentagon Papers revealed lies layered so carefully they had once passed for strategy. Watergate exposed the presidency as something breakable. David Adler was no longer a student of history. He was inside it. After the war, nothing fits back. Returning soldiers did not come home to parades. They came home to confusion, guilt, and silence, the same tools their fathers had used, but without the illusion of purpose. David tried teaching. He stood in classrooms explaining how narratives are built, how power edits memory. Students listened, skeptical but curious. They wanted answers he could not simplify. History, he told them, is not what happened, it's what survived. The seventh American lesson: truth ages poorly. In 1974, Nixon resigned. For a brief moment, accountability seemed possible. Then the country moved on. David watched how quickly outrage expired, how easily complexity was replaced by comfort. America did not forget, it overwrote. A father's shadow. Sorting through Samuel's old papers, David found ledgers, correspondence, contracts, evidence of influence, of compromise, of moral gray zones. Not crimes, something worse, complicity. David realized his father had not been evil, he had been effective, and America rewards effectiveness. The rise of a new confidence. The 1980s arrived loud and unapologetic. Markets surged, regulations softened, greed was reframed as ambition. David watched familiar patterns return under new slogans. Different decade, same machinery. History was looping. The choice to speak or fade. David published a book in 1987. It did not accuse, it documented. It traced how American power consistently traded ethics for speed, silence for stability. The response was predictable. Some praised it, many ignored it, a few called it unpatriotic. David accepted all of it. He had learned the final American lesson. The truth doesn't need permission, it needs endurance. What survives? David retired in the early 1990s. He watched the Cold War end not with reflection, but celebration. The same confidence his father once witnessed returned under a different banner. America had won again, and once again it did not look back. Epilogue: The Quiet Inheritance. Years later, David's granddaughter would ask him a question Samuel had never answered. Was America worth it? David thought of a boy on a ship, a man behind a desk, a nation always in motion. Yes, he said finally, but only if we remember who paid for it. Final truth. America is not a promise, it is a process, built by the desperate, directed by the ambitious, questioned by the brave, and remembered only if someone refuses to be silent.